Hello, everyone. Welcome to the House of Footy YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be going through every single club for 2023 and classifying them as an overachiever or an underachiever for their year and how they've performed. And to do that with me today, I've got House of Footy representative, Mr. Jared Thomas. Jared, welcome.
Hello. I think this is my first appearance on the channel. This is very exciting. I'm very excited to go through. We've just been doing a bit of footy chat of our own, so it's gonna be very interesting.
We are obviously going to go through. We're doing this during the final series. So we're going to classify it more as a home and away season type of vibe. And I think we know the majority of the results anyway. Once you get to a prelim week, it sort of doesn't really matter how your season went.
No, it's a form. It's form based by that point. It's the best teams at the end of the year are the ones that are still there, and it's shown up as it is. Carlton GWS finished their seasons well, and here they are.
Fantastic stuff. All right, let's get straight into it. We're going to do the ladder standings to do this. We'll just simply classify it as an over and under and give a bit of statement as to why. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way to the top. And bottom was a team that had probably one of the most terrible seasons in history, yet finished with 3 wins. West Coast Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to say that a wooden spooner kind of just hit the level that they expected. No one really expected them to do any more than what they did. So I suppose you could say, like, if you had to pick it, it had to be underachiever because they couldn't. You can't say they did any better than they did. But I'd just say they, yeah, pretty much just achieved. Based on purely ladder standings on the wins, sort of towards the back end of the year, they kind of overachieved in the back end of the year. Um, and yeah, it's just like 53 percentage is just kind of tells the story. They had 4 or 5 100-point losses this year, and that big one against Sydney that sticks out in memory. So yeah, I mean it's a year to forget for the Eagles, and unfortunately, I don't think they're going to get much better as the seasons go on to next year.
It is kind of that weird feeling because they've had moments where they've overachieved, moments where they're very much underachieved, and then just hit the KPI in the middle.
Yeah, it's a weird season for the Eagles.
Yeah, to go from beating um, the Dogs at Marvel and then losing to Sydney at the SCG by 170 odd or whatever it was
Yeah.
points. It's a big scale. It's a big scale. So we look forward to seeing what they do next year. But them and North Melbourne. North Melbourne also
Mm.
finished on three wins. Didn't get the wooden spoon because they had 18% better.
Like ridiculous amount, by the way, and the fact that they had it in their grasp coming into the last round, and then they decided they were going to win a game. This is actually a rare one where they definitely underachieved. I think. I don't think their list is amazing by any stretch. But they brought in Clarko, and they weren't expected to be good this year. But I think they were expected to make more of a fight, especially after their start to the season when they went 2-0. I think people thought they were going to be a little bit better than they were. And then they went on a massive losing streak. They didn't win for months and months and really struggled, especially when Clarko went out as well. So I think they underachieved North. I think they could have been pushing a little bit higher than they did. Like the gap between 17 and 16 and the rest of the comp is very, very like broad. And I think, yeah, they underachieved. But again, no one really expected that much of them.
I completely agree. So the two bottom sides have underachieved this year. Fair to say, I think if you're finishing in the bottom two, you're going to be underachieving
Yeah.
regardless of your circumstances. But I think a team that's in 16th compared to the rest of the comp, and one I think a lot of people are bullish about are Hawthorn. What were your thoughts on their 2023?
The thing is, if you do it just based off the standings, they probably underachieved because they finished 16th and, like they had patches, whatever. But if you do it based on the way they played their games and the wins that they had, they overachieved by a fair bit. And they're one of those teams where you look into their next year and the year's coming. That midfield is very scary.
Yeah.
John Newcomb, Will Day, the likes of them, they're going to be a very good team. Sam Mitchell has got a very good little crop of young players that's going to build, and they've got James Sicily leading them. Um, very going to be like a scary outfit, I think, in a couple of years' time. So I think based on their performance and their wins, they overachieved. But in terms of the actual ladder position, it's kind of just again what people sort of thought they were going to finish. No one really expected too much of the Hawks this year.
Their top end talent is one of the best in the comp, and it's led by John Newcomb. And the fact is, as well, they get to play games down in Tasmania, and for them, that's a winning pot. They
They have
get
a
their
yeah.
momentum going all year because they'll have 1 or 2 wins down there, and it just makes them look 10 feet tall.
Yeah, they like Tassie for them is a big. a big thing, and they get a good crowd down there as well. So if they can keep playing games down in Tassie and sort of build off that, yeah, like you said, that young core, they're going to be a very good team in the few years. And next year, I don't know if they'll play finals next year. They'll definitely be knocking on the door. But they're definitely going to be improving from 16th next year, I think.
James Sicily leading that charge, and hopefully he keeps his form going. I think in terms of form, and we go to 15th. This is probably one of the more interesting ones you could classify. Gold Coast Suns, obviously having the 9 wins for the year. They had their purple patch. I think wins against the Crows and Darwin were sensational. The wins against Geelong up at Heritage Bank Stadium. But I just think, and in my opinion, I think they underachieved.
Yeah, they are. And the thing is, they're serial underachievers as well.
Yeah, I
They
was gonna say
probably they probably should have been in there well before this year, and they just haven't still. And it'd be a frustrating time being a Suns fan because they are constantly touted as being the next big thing and the next sort of finals contender, and then they manage to, yeah, like I said, they had those massive wins, and they start being like people start talking about them, and then it all just falls down again. And it's an interesting one, but they definitely underachieved this year. They've got a really talented midfield as well. Rao, Anderson, they're the likes of Lukosius and things like that. And like their forward line isn't bad at all, and their back line's really nice. So I don't know what happened, but underachievers for me.
yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting who the likes of well, obviously with Damien Hardwick coaching next year. Be interesting to see how they pan out. And I think the usage of their forward line, and obviously having Ben King up there, and the defensive unit is very, very good. And their defensive unit is an overachieving part of their list because they have to do so much every single
Yeah,
week.
100%.
Is there a player for the Gold Coast next year that you think could be the reason they could overachieve?
See, I think he's already had a really good year this year, but he hasn't got the plaudits for it. But Matt Rowell, people have kind of gone off him in recent because like Noah Anderson sort of came out and he had that injury and stuff. But I think Matt Rowell takes his game to another level next year, becomes like the premier contested midfielder in the comp. Like he already is pretty much up there with like, like Nearly Libra and stuff like that. But I think he's gonna like really announce himself again and be sort of that driving charge for the Suns to sort of get there. I think they maybe need to improve their forward line a little bit for it to happen. I think it's aging, Casbolt isn't gonna be there forever. But Matt Real, I think, is going to be the one where he's going to get the ball more often next year, and he's going to really help. Led by Dimmer, sort of Dimmer putting him under his wing, massive for Real, I think, and massive for their year next year.
Definitely. 14th place, definitely probably the definition of underachieved in 2023 is Fremantle. Just a big drop off that not it wasn't expected, but I think at the same time you look at the recent history of Fremantle, and every time they've gotten to that top four, top five spot, they've always dramatically dropped. And for this year to come in, they had the losses to North early on. They had no confidence. They were pumped from time to time. It's a very weird situation
Yeah,
over at Freo.
yeah, I think I tipped them to be like top four, like top five, top six this
Yeah,
year, and obviously they didn't. I think, yeah, like you said, lost all their confidence straight away. They lost to the Saints and the North in the first two rounds. Like the Saints one, they were pretty much battered the whole time. The North one was obviously a big one at the end, and then they shouldn't have lost. I think Freo are the biggest underachievers this year, but also it's not like they've got the talent there to do it. Their game plan though really limits what they do. Like their little kick mark game in the back line will not win you games of footy. That's not how footy works anymore. You look at the teams that are dominating, you look at Collingwood, you look at Brisbane, you look at the Giants with their wave. They run and attack in waves so fast. Freo don't do that. And I think it's why they're where they are because they just can't seem to break the mold that they have of just Brennan Cox and Ryan just kicking it to each other in the back line. Like
kicking a
it doesn't,
catch.
yeah, like it just doesn't work. So I think they need to work on that before they work on any of their players, to be honest.
I completely agree. But also at the same time, at least they've got a sort of a foundation they can lead with
Yeah,
into next year. Sarong, Brayshaw, Darcy, one of the premier ruckmen in the comp, Diamis up forward.
100%.
They've got a long, long list, I think, to be capable of achieving something next year. 13th was Richmond. Now, this for me, obviously, is an underachieving. for the year, especially with the talent they have. But I think in patches they still were definitely the Richmond we know.
Yeah, they. This is the thing with this season is a lot of these teams were still in the hunt for finals up until the last two rounds of the season, kind of thing. Um, so they underachieved, but I think the ladder position kind of doesn't flatter them like it does the opposite. Like it makes it seem worse than the season actually was. I thought Richmond was still fine. Tim Taranto had a very good year, as we know, coming in for his first year, kind of thing. I think they were still okay. They're certainly not the Richmond that we know of 2017 through to 2020, 2020 kind of thing. But they are always going to be thereabouts, I think. Like, I think they're not going to have a dramatic drop like Freo did, where they're just going to like, I know it's like a spot, but like, they're not going to have that massive dip in form. They're going to always kind of be okay because they keep bringing in players that want to play there. They missed Tom Lynch all year. Tom Lynch in that side is a very different Richmond this year. So I don't think they underachieved too much. They underachieved a little bit, but in terms of the competition they had in those final spots, you can't really ask for too much more.
Who's coaching Richmond next year?
I don't think it's going to be Andrew McWalter. I think they let him go. I don't think he showed enough in the back end of the year. Um, man, I don't know. I think like Adam Uze could go again. I don't think they're going to pick him, but I think it's shown like with Adam Kingsley, who like we'll get to. Um, Picking first time coaches isn't a bad thing. I think it helps bring a real fresh thing. So bringing Adam Uze in might be the option for Richmond. Um, or Carr or something like that. But I think it's going to be pretty wide open. I think the Tigers one.
Yeah, it's a tough one to pick for the Tigers in terms of who's going to coach them next year. You go to 12th place, and it's funny because 12th place was the premiers of last year, Geelong. So anything other than a premiership is sort of underachieving anyway. But
Yeah.
boy, they're underachieved.
Well, it's funny. Like in any other sport in the entire world, having your premiers the year before drop down well out of finals the year after is a massive thing. But it happens so often in the AFL where either a premier or a grand finalist drops really low that it kind of becomes normal. People didn't really talk about Geelong's drop off that much this year. It was a little bit, sure, but like not as much as you'd expect. Um, Obviously the loss of Selwood was big for them, but they lost a lot of games in that sort of early part of the year that they shouldn't have, and played some poor football. And then the back end of the year they just started crumbling. They had the loss to the Saints that could have kind of kept their season alive, and just yeah, it was a not a very good year for the Cats, and this is their equal lowest finish ever in any VFL AFL
Baffling,
season. Unbelievable, like truly.
baffling. They're finishing 12th. Obviously, 12th in the few years back was a wooden
Was
spoon.
Spooners, yeah.
Now they're 18th. There's 18 leagues in the comp, and they're finishing 12th. So bottom third, but still,
Rough. Still fun.
they'll be right.
Hmm.
As in, probably not right,
Not yet.
right, but they'll get there.
They'll be okay. Yeah.
Just bring in some people that's under 30.
Yeah, that's I think the game plan for them now. Bring in anybody that starts with a two for their age would be nice.
Do you reckon? Do you reckon they know what the word reboot is down there?
I don't reckon like half the Cats fans that were at these games were like, so what happens after what happens after round 23, round 24, and we're not in the top eight? Like what do the Cats do? Do we play a different tournament? Like do we go for a different cup? And they're like, no, no, you guys just have to go home now and
What?
just watch.
Why is traveling in September cheaper?
What's going on here? Why can't I go to the snow all of a sudden?
Enjoy that one, Cats fans,
Yeah,
while
you're
also
welcome.
watching your 2022 Premiership replay.
That's what I'd
Good
be
on you.
doing.
Yeah, Essendon finished 11th, and I think after everything they went through, and having glimpses, for me, they were one of the bigger underachievers for the year. I still think they had moments where like they showcase what they have, but just the last 4 to 5 weeks, for me, I sort of base it on what they were at compared to the season in general. So I think where they were at and where they ended up, it's just an underachiever for me.
Yeah, see, I'm like basing mine kind of on where I predicted them to be at the start of the year and where they sort of projected to be. they're kind of about the level I thought they were going to be. I didn't think they were going to make finals. I thought they were going to kind of be on that outer. So I sort of think they achieved that. They didn't overachieve, certainly. I think they are either at it or below. But then if you base it on the form this season, where they could have been halfway through the year, when they beat Carlton halfway through the year, it was Bombers could be top four. Bombers could win a final for the first time in 13,000 days. It was the chance for the Bombers to really make an impact. And then, yeah, like you said, that last 4 or 5 weeks, they were one of the worst teams in the comp. They got smashed by the Giants, scraped over the line against North and the Eagles at home.
Mm.
Poor, really poor back end of the year. And they'll be like Brad Scott will be a very rough coach to be under for the preseason. I think they're gonna get smashed.
Yeah, a few extra laps
Just a
around the
couple.
hangar. In 10th, um, overachievers. Definitely overachievers. The Adelaide Crows, one of the more fun teams of 2023. Definitely
Yeah,
very enjoyable to watch. Smashed teams a fair bit when they got a good run on. Playing at the Adelaide Oval as well. Didn't travel too well, as it was well documented. But overall, for them, and they missed out on finals due to a couple of things that I'm sure doesn't want to be dug up too much um, for Crows fans. But I think they're overachievers and they've done it very well.
yeah. Again, if we base it off preseason, I think I had them around here as well. But the way they played, looking at their percentages enough, they're at 116 percentage. That's pretty high to be a team that's
Yeah,
not in the eight. Um,
literally.
like yeah, like you said, they were there and thereabouts in the last two rounds of the year, and they probably should have been there. Well, it's how it is. But they overachieved in the games they did. Like they put up really good fights against Collingwood. They won both the showdowns, unfortunately for you, but they won both showdowns comfortably. Um, so it was it's one of those years where they had a lot of massive wins, but it's their losses to teams early in the year that really have cost them big time. And they should have won a lot of those winnable ones, and then they won the ones they shouldn't have. Really weird.
Yeah, it was a weird year for the Crows, but overall, something it's yeah, you don't really want to guarantee finals places the year after, but
Yeah.
you'd almost lock them in.
Yeah, I think so. I think their backline really stood up this year, like Murray and sort of Doty and Butts and stuff. And I think that means that they're still young, that backline. So I think they're just going to be better for it and they're going to be better next year. Their small forward line, like Tex Walker is in career best form. Their small forwards in Rankin and Rochelle are obviously incredible as well. They've still got Phil Thorpe and Fogarty and all that coming through. So I would say, if you were going to put a team in there, it's probably the Crows as a team that's probably out of the eight that's going to come in. But yeah, I think they overachieved for sure, but they just had those sort of games this year where you went, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Like,
they had their sort of like immature moments, but it's
yeah,
expected to be from a young group.
experience, exactly right. And they had similar issues to Brisbane where they struggled to win games away from home. Brisbane didn't have an excuse though. Brisbane have done it for years and years and years, whereas Adelaide, they've got a lot less experience, so you could kind of give them a pass for it. If it keeps continuing on that trend, that's when you start to worry a little bit. But they're still a very young team and probably going to be very good next year.
Looking forward to see what the Crows do, and we go from one of the more enjoyable teams to one of the more underachieving teams for the year. The Western Bulldogs finished in ninth. They didn't make the eight. Terribly disappointing, and they've been ridiculed for it. And we spoke about the loss to West Coast, but just like Beveridge and his team have just lost this mentality where they used to do the job and do it well, but now as soon as they're even pressured, they fall away.
Yeah, and like people have been saying the last couple of days because we're filming this not long after the Carlton Melbourne final where Melbourne have just gone out in straight sets, and people have been saying how the Melbourne list is one of the biggest wastes of a list. I think this Dogs team is more than anything in the world. Melbourne I can excuse because their forward line obviously still needs work, but the Dogs, like the players on the Dogs list, you can't look at that and be like, that's not even a finals team. They like finishing ninth, but I think they're one of the biggest underachievers of the year because they should not be ninth ever. They should be winning finals, pushing sort of top four areas, but they constantly fall away. And I don't know if it's like they need a coaching change or something like that, but something has to change with the Dogs because you can't waste Bontempelli's career. I
Yes,
know he's won a flag, but he deserves more. He deserves to be lauded as, one of the game's greats by the end. And like it's just a really weird time for the Dogs because they're one of the biggest underachievers ever, but they keep almost getting there. And it's just like they've just got to push one step above.
100% agree. We go into the top eight, and who finished eighth was the Sydney Swans. I think it just speaks for itself in terms of where they were last year, the expectation coming into this year. Got that little grand final hangover that teams seem to have after, especially after a big grand final loss. They underachieved, but I think the way they were still able to work their way through some of the difficult challenges they had this year. It's not a season that went to waste as such. It's more of a season that you probably could have hoped for a bit more, but the way they did it, I think, is typical Sydney. And to be honest, I'll be back.
Yeah, I like Swans have still like they were just in a grand final and they still have one of the best young lists in the comp and they're in that real sweet spot where Sydney will be there constantly now. They definitely underachieved this year, I think. I thought they should have been really good this year, and they've got the players for it. Errol Goulden, Chad Warner, Tom McCartan. They've got the players they need to do that. But it was their early season form where they got thumped by the Cats again. Like they had those losses early, and they had some terrible games. That draw against the Cats as well was one of the worst games of football ever. um, so like they played not amazing footy, and they should have cemented a final spot a lot earlier than they did. And it took a very late charge for them to do it, but they'll be back 100%.
We go from underachievers to, I think, capital letters overachieved in seventh. GWS. Now, we've you and I have obviously heaped a lot of praise across all platforms with this team. The Orange Tsunami, the Orange team, have just come into everyone's hearts because they're just so likable. But the way they've done it with the attitude they've had, and Adam Kingsley in his first year to get them into what we're speaking now as a prelim and could very well be a grand final, regardless of any result, they've so overachieved. And I think full credit to Kingsley, full credit to Toby Green as a captain and the playing list because that playing list is talented, but none would have expected to be as far and as deep into finals as what they've done and the win loss ratio they've had this year.
Yeah, like Adam Kingsley is coach of the year, purely because of how much the Giants have overachieved. People had them bottom four, and it's just the way they're playing this has come across even from round one. Like the way they've built from round one to now even is insane. Like their back line, Sam Taylor and Jack Buckley, like they have had massive improvements this year and are now one of the best back lines in the comp. Their midfield is unbelievable. Like Canelio in there, Tom Green, they play ridiculous football. They covered the loss of Taranto and Hopper with no worries whatsoever. Um, and then their forward line as well. Like Bedford and Daniels are two of the most underrated small forwards in the comp. Like they are so lightning quick
Mm-hmm.
and so just pressurized forwards. And then of course there's Toby Green. Like you can't even. It's unbelievable to think that at the start of this year, you'd look at half those players. Like you'd look at Taylor, you look at Buckley, Tom Green a little bit. Like he was getting there, but people didn't think he was going to be as good as he was. Bedford and Daniels, you look at those players and you're like, yeah, they're okay, but they're not going to win Giants finals. They've done it twice now. So they are unbelievable, the Giants, and the biggest overachievers of the year by a mile for me.
As I said, capital letters,
Yep, 100%.
sensational. We move on to probably another overachiever for the year, and it's your boys, St Kilda. How did you find this year for you?
Yeah, overachieved massively. I had said when we picked up Ross that this year wasn't going to be an amazing year for us. I thought we'd kind of be around where we were last year in that the mathematical chance to make finals in the last two rounds, like the classic kind of thing where you have to win by 250 points or whatever. But like I didn't sort of have us in the finals. Because Ross, when he gets a list, he likes to sort of have a year, look at what he's got, and then do some big cuts and bring in who he wants to in the year after and really sort it out. So I thought, if anything, 2024 is going to be the year we're going to start making finals. We made finals this year and we played the way that we needed to play to win games. And we overachieved massively, I think, especially early parts of the year. We were top of the ladder after round four and we only lost to the Pies in round five by a goal. Like it was that first sort of month of the year was the biggest overachievement we could have done. And it helped set a really good platform where even when we had form dips here and there in the season, we still had that really strong base to build off. We were in fifth for like 8 weeks in a row or something like that, which was just ridiculous. So yeah, we overachieved massively, I think. And I think we're going to get better next year.
Couple of recruits come in, and I think the Saints will be marching on.
Let's hope so. Right.
Another, all right, now Carlton finished fifth. It's an interesting one because the expectation at the start of the year was for them to be about where they are, fifth, sixth, pushing top four. They have the list. We know what they did. They got through halfway through the year. They stumbled. They fell away. Everyone was thinking, here we go, bottom four. And they went on this miraculous run home to finish themselves in fifth. They're in a prelim, probably one of the best teams in the comp in terms of form for the last 10 weeks or so. I think they overachieved in terms of I, I didn't have them. I had them fifth for the year, but I didn't think they'd go as far as they have. And I'm not saying overachieved is a bad thing. I'm saying overachieved is in they've gone above and beyond people's expectations, and proving people wrong to be in their position now is great. And they're going to set themselves up for constant, consistent success, hopefully, over the next few years as well, with the way they've gone about things.
I this could be slightly controversial. I think based on this is based on before the season, like before anyone's played any games of footy. I think the Blues underachieved, right?
Ooh.
So I think the Blues should have been top four side this year. So like I'm saying, they slightly underachieved. Obviously, they finished fifth, so they were as close you could have got to being in my little mark as you could. But I think they had the reigning two Coleman medalists. They have the Brownlow medalist. They had Jacob Wiedering, who is one of the best defenders in the comp, right? They brought in Blake Acres, who filled kind of the only hole that they had on their list in terms of players that can play a role really well. They brought him in on the wing and filled that hole. I was like, there is no weakness in this team. They should be one of the best teams in the comp. And for the majority of the year, they weren't. So that's why I'm saying they underachieved. But if you base it off the start of this year to now, they overachieved massively in the terms that they went from 15th to 5th by the end of the year. But I think based off how I had them early with the list that they had, I think they underachieved for the majority of the year. And they should have finished higher than 5th.
I think you're right. I don't think there's. And it's one of those ones where their season was sort of like three parts. The initial start, everyone's like, "Here we go." They're on. Middle part of the year, terrible. Going to be underachieving. Come back, and now they're playing in a prelim final. So it's a difficult one to judge. But I think, oh, regardless of how you could say it, they've done what they could, and they've finally done something they haven't done in such a long period of time, and then that's make prelim final week.
100%. And like they are coming into prelim finals, one of the best teams in the comp. Like they are, if anyone's going to beat Brisbane at the Gabba, it's going to be the Blues. So it'll be a really interesting match when it happens. But yeah, I think as the year as a whole, I think Blues fans will obviously be unbelievably happy. But I think they could have been even better than they were for sure.
100%. Going to the top four now, the D's finishing fourth, pretty consistent throughout the home and away season. I don't think they underachieved and I don't think they overachieved. I think they did what they had to do. If you throw in your finals results, I think they underachieved
Yeah,
because the way they should have been this final series, they should be in a prelim, they should be contending, but they obviously aren't. So I think in that sense, they underachieved. But otherwise, they had, how do you put it? The most stock standard year for a top four team.
I think yeah, like they were the most middle of the road, exactly what you'd expect kind of deal for Melbourne. They had parts of the year where they kind of faltered a little bit. But I think this is about exactly where I had them coming into the year. Um, maybe even higher. So maybe they underachieved because I thought the Brody Grundy thing was going to work out, but it obviously didn't. But I think they were just about where you'd expect them to kind of be. Um, and yeah, obviously the finals, you bring that in, they underachieved. But if we're going just on home and away, they were kind of exactly what you'd expect from the D's.
We'll move on to Port Adelaide. And I think with people where they had them this year, they definitely overachieved people's expectations. One of the bigger overachievers because You look at it, they had a 13-game win streak. They were 1-2 at the start of the year. People were calling for Ken Inkley's sacking. Ended up getting a contract extension, which is debatable in Port fans' eyes and a few
Yeah.
others. Um, but in that sense, you look at the home and away basis, they've overachieved massively, got themselves top four. Obviously, going out in straight sets is a little bit disheartening, and I think the commentary around that is, with the list they have, they definitely should be in a position where they should be in a prelim final. Um, I don't know. I'd get your thoughts on it because I think, in a sense, they've just overachieved. They've done above and beyond everything, and I think they're about where they are.
Yeah, I think Port are kind of with the Saints and Giants in terms of that overachieved beyond like the preseason kind of thing. I think preseason a lot of people didn't have Port. Definitely didn't have them third. I can like tell you that, but I think people like maybe had them like sort of coming into the finals or just around it. But yeah, they overachieved massively. I think home and away, obviously, and then finals is a whole different breed. But the thing is with the Port midfield as well, especially they've got such a young midfield in like the Butters, Rosie, Horn, Francis, where they will be thereabouts for a while. They've still got like really talented sort of bookends at each side and like developing ones as well. If you can keep Ollie Lord, they've got like Todd Marshall, they've got all those kind of guys. Dixon's still going to be around. The other side, they've got Aaliyah, and then you've got that midfield, and all those kind of players, they will be thereabouts. So I think it's a great base to build off because they know where they need to get to, that young sort of brigade. And they definitely overachieved this year because, yeah, I thought, no one really had them where they were, and then they ended up coming around to it.
I think, yeah, with that, and Port fans will obviously think they're over, they haven't achieved anything. Um, but if you base it off of that, yeah, you're completely right. There's a lot to move off with, and I think this time Port are going to build off it again, and just hope they put an extension in front of Travis Boak.
100%.
Top two, Brisbane. Again, I think you get to the top two now, and you're just like achieved. They've
Literally, I was about to say, much like Melbourne, I think the 2-1 that we have pretty much gone about where they were. I think my preseason was, Pies, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Blues. I think that was my top four. And, I always thought the Pies were going to be fun good, and they were. And then, Brisbane, as we know, their list is so talented. And they brought in Dunkley, which made them even better. Um, and, their record at the Gabba speaks for itself as achieved as you can get it, really. They didn't over under. I think they went about exactly where the lines should have been. And time will tell whether or not they can sort of break that prelim final curse that they've got and make the way to a grand final.
correct, and obviously we mentioned number one, Collingwood. We're not spending too much time on these teams, as we said. They've achieved everything they thought they would. I will add with Collingwood. I honestly think if they don't win the flag from the position they've been in, they've been the best side all year. If they don't win the flag, I think they've underachieved.
I think if they manage to get to the grand final and then lose it from there, I think that's where you've underachieved. For some reason in my mind, if they lose in a prelim, that shows better for them than if they lost it in the grand final because if they get into the grand final, they're playing either Brisbane or Carlton. So they're playing a team, Brisbane, who are known to not play well at the G. And Collingwood should be able to do that, or they're playing Carlton, who finished fifth. And then that one's a bit more whatever because the crowd will be a lot more 50-50 and it'll be a lot sort of different that way. But the Pies should definitely be winning it. So my mind here is that if the Pies don't make a grand final, if the Pies don't win the grand final, you'd almost rather go out now than make the grand final and lose it because the Pies should be winning it all. And they'll be very upset if they don't.
Completely agree.
There we
And I
go.
think that does pretty much wrap up everything from our 1 to 18. Overachievers, underachievers. It's going to be a very interesting series to see exactly next year where these underachievers go and how the overachievers achieve, really.
Yeah. Who do you reckon of the sort of that bottom 10, who do you think's going to sort of overachieve come next year?
I would love to watch Gold Coast do
Yeah.
something. I think they're the ones. You look at everyone else and, you know, you look at them and you go, Gold Coast for me, if everyone's wanted to see them go that extra mile, everyone else there is, if they make the eight, you're sort of like, all right, you're overachieving, but we sort of knew you could do it.
Yeah.
Top deal. Whereas Gold Coast, we've never seen them do it. So if
No.
they do it, that's overachieving, and what they can do from there
Yeah.
would definitely be good to see. What about you?
Sort of looking at it, yeah, Gold Coast is a very nice one. Like I was saying before as well, I'd love to see Hawthorn sort of challenging. I love the way that their midfield and the way their team is set out. So seeing them sort of make a real case to sort of, they don't have to make finals, but making a real case for it, would be lovely to see, I think, because they're a team that I think will be very good. Um, and their young players will only benefit from being in those pressure situations where it gets to round 23 and, you've got to win and like those sort of games, you need young players to get used to them. And that would just do them a lot of good if they can get there next year.
Completely agree. Looking forward to seeing some of the young crop and certain teams with their young talent really take the next step. And who knows, you might see West Coast just shock the world and finish sixth.
Top four. Top four Eagles.
I'll take it. Top four Eagles indeed. Imagine that.
Optus Stadium would be rocking.
It'll be definitely rocking. But that wraps us up here. Make sure you do follow the socials on House of Footy and check out the YouTube channel and subscribe. All the articles and everything on the website as well. Get around it because there's
Yeah,
a lot of
absolutely.
things to come. And Jared, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to make my debut.
Yeah, you've definitely overachieved in your debut.
Oh, wow. You've
Yeah.
underachieved.
See you next time, everyone.